Okay, but I'm going to talk about a book, or parts of a book, just to give you an understanding of at least where we're coming from when we talk about target value delivery. And we use that term because value is prominent, is dominant, right? Cost is only a means of getting what you want. And value is not delivered until you complete the project. So we don't want to mislead people in thinking that TBD refers only to design. Okay, so this is just the definition. First of all, TBD is a process. It's not a method, it uses methods to achieve a specific objective, right? And that's to set and steer projects to value and cost targets prior to design. Setting prior to design, steering through design, construction, supply, commissioning to handover, right? Okay. So there's a book that has been it's supposed to have been out for about a year now. And so I get tired of skeptical. People become skeptical when you say, oh yeah, it's right around the corner. Well, I again think it's right around the corner. So we'll see. I'm going to work from presuppositions. These are basically propositions that underlie TBD as a process. Okay? And the first one, as you can read, is that target value can be set prior to design based on the objectives of the project. Design is but a means for getting to those objectives. A second key presupposition is that an allowable cost can be set prior to design based on expected benefits from hitting project targets. And I've been accused of making this look simple, but I hope I've deserved the accusation. I think this is plain as potatoes, but that's not how everybody does it. But shouldn't they?
I would assume we had a business plan.
What's that?
That would assume we had a business plan.
I don't have a business. So you need to see a doctor. I might be. The first thing to do in order to express your expression of what you want is to develop a functional program. And that means because the facility building, to be a railroad track as far as I'm concerned, has functions that need to be executed, carried out, in order to deliver what the project objectives are. Right? They could be in terms of return on investment, they could be in terms of net zero, they could be in terms of filling a gap in your marketing plan, right? Before a competitor gets into that hole. So all of the above and more. Basically, what we need to do is to specify those functions and what outcomes they are to be used to perform. Right? So maybe some, and then you have to also say qualitative requirements, which might be just verbal, or they might be very specific, really measured. Right? So 100% uptime in a plant, a factory, means absolutely something, probably impossible to achieve 100%. So achieves a lead goal, right? So those kinds of things can be decided absolutely at the beginning in the process of deciding if you are going to do a project, and if so, what project. These are factors external to the program, external conditions that you have to be sensitive to and take into account as you make decisions, right, about defining the project. And there always will be some irreducible uncertainty. And it's wise to know what that is and where it lies, right? Because even though it's irreducible, you can't make it go away. You might be able to manage it. Right? And if not, you have to allow for it. A third key presupposition is that cost can be set for achieving value targets by regressing from the functional program to a facilities program. Regression is one of the modes of thinking that we do in doing logical things with our brains, right? In this case, we're working, instead of from means to ends, we're working from ends to means, right? The functional program states ends, the facilities program is a part of specification means, right? The building is a means for achieving project objectives. Yep. You can interrupt me, it's okay. Really? Really?
So
Yes.
there's different project objectives if you're the owner versus if you're a contractor.
Right, but the fundamental objectives of the project are set by the owner. Now, if you share risk and reward with that owner, then you're part of the ownership team. Okay, so here the spatial program for buildings. Yeah.
Can you do TBD without being in a shared risk reward contract?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But you can't do it if you don't blend construction and design. I think it just doesn't work. You can hire guns, right? Substitutes, but they don't have the same stake in the game. So here, it would be no surprise to architects in the room that the spatial program in a building, I'm talking specifically about buildings, is paramount, right? Because functions are performed in spaces, and the characteristics of those spaces are dictated by the function and the capacity at which they're to be performed. And then, of course, you have a space performance narrative that is where we capture qualitative requirements. These are often called room data sheets. I did this to give you a little taste of the book. This is from chapter 2. It's important to note that the facility program is still design independent. While there may be sketches or massing diagrams to support the concepts and quantification of the facility program, they're not intended to be design solutions. Okay, an example. This started as a research project in 2016 at the Project Production Systems Laboratory at Cal. And we've been working all that time, probably 6 years of those 8, doing research, collecting information, trying things out, right? Kicking the tires. And then another 2 to 3 years writing, which is exhausting. And then another year working with the publisher to try to get the damn thing published. So I like the first part better. Okay, but look. So I think this is really the important piece here. One of the what's wanted, target values, and the cost of providing what's wanted, target cost, are determined prior to design by creating through simulation a model of the building from the voice of the customer, then costing the materials, components, and services needed to construct that building. This can be done on the back of a sheet of paper, a lot of sheets of paper, right, which would probably wear out. It'd be much better to have a software program, and there's a bunch of them. Hattila was one of the first. Hattila is based in Finland, and I've been working with them since 2000. Now here, the simulation model is fully detailed, buildable, and capable of supporting desired functions at desired capacities, but is not what will be constructed. In fact, there's no visual readout, because you don't want to fall in love with something that is not intended to replace design, but rather to enable design. Okay. Tell me when I
You know, you just, you talk about creating a cost based on a concept and, from an estimating standpoint, it's what's the cost per square foot? Well, you don't have a square foot in that type of model. It's like, well, how
What
do
you
we
do,
know it?
you do when you run the model,
Yeah.
when you run the simulation. So it's a question and answer type format, and every time you make a different decision, a different entry into the model, it changes the cost and it changes the schedule.
What we find out, on the construction side is that owners will come in and say, well, we want to build this 300,000 square foot building and our budget is $100 million. And it's like, well, how did you come up with $100 million? Well, that's what we think it costs. And then you come in and all of a sudden it's 200 million and they're like, hey, wait, what happened here? So, I mean, this is an interesting.
Well, I think what I'm describing is a better way of doing that. Making that.
Again, as a slightly different question, you may have talked about it before.
Okay.
So I think we're starting off with what is the owner's project requirement? When you start,
What is what?
What is the big question for everyone is meeting the owner's project requirements.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's actually project objectives.
I'm sorry, project
Objectives are way down the means.
Thank you.
Departments.
So, what I'm talking about in your remote working, at what stage do you go through the owner's project objectives? And
Do you have, get what?
as you go through the design, as you go through this process, so as you go through this process, do you have a checklist? Because now the world is a different place. You have a lot of things that you could do remotely. You could only do in a building.
Sure.
You say, okay, is the owner's project objective? And is there a checkbox that says this doesn't necessarily have to result in construction, room, space? It can be done remotely. In your system, do you have
An option for exporting. Yeah, well, this process, this simulation program is really smart, right? But it's because it's got a ton of information built into it. It has to be facilitated. And so that's the role of facilitation, is to remember, is to say, ooh, if we just pass, there was a road that went that way. Should we have taken it? You can go back and find it.
so in the toolkit, the process you're advocating,
Mhm.
is that, because my business makes money by designing things that get built. So I have a financial interest to build something, but
Right.
is there a checkbox in there to say, well, do you really need to build it? Is that-
Oh, absolutely. No, that's, if we're clear about what our value is, what our fundamental objectives are for the project, why we're doing the project, then we are encouraging people, right, designers and builders, working together to find the best way to get those benefits for you, right? Benefit maybe for them. Okay?
At this point, it could be no building.
Oh, of course. No, yeah. Do you really need it? Yeah, exactly. Oh, and this is just an example of my statement that they embed, this was the fifth version of their software came out in around, maybe 2020. And it had 500,000 lines of code. And now they have another version. I don't know how many lines of code it has, but it's very simple to use, but it's not very simple to construct. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with what do they build? Do they build something that's are they building the same type of building?
No, they build a wide variety of buildings. They build, museums. They got an award for a museum. They build commercial buildings. They build fire stations. I mean, they built everything since 1980.
Glenn,
Yeah.
Do you have an example or two of the value proposition or the value definition at this very early stage that you think, for example, is a useful value definition? James was just mentioning to me that UCSF is going to develop a proton center. As a cancer patient myself, one of the things I would assume is that there's some kind of proposition around proton radiation delivery that is, if not superior, at least additive to the full range of different kinds of radiation therapies, that it makes it really worth having at UCSF. I would think that that might be the kind of thing you're talking about, but
Yeah, reason for the project.
right.
I mean, I think there are so many possible reasons, right? But that's certainly one.
Yeah, so do you have an example where you start using the hot tele on some kind of project and how they came up with a definition of the value target before the cost product or target or design?
Well, this simulation model is, it's a search. It's an inquiry, right? Well, it talks back to you. And so if you specify something like the proton proposition, it will make some assumptions that are reasonable assumptions based on previous experience and knowledge about how things are connected to one another in engineered structures. So, yeah, I'm sure, I don't think I can help you very much.
Yeah, I guess, I'm thinking of like,
Okay, good.
Based on what, so you're looking at a procedure, you look at what use cases there are, right? What types of cancers can you treat? You start to look at the volume catchment, so okay, how many patients do you think are in that area? You start to look at how many of the, what the area is, then you can look at throughput of the machine. You can look at hours that you're gonna run. That eventually turns into a certain number of patients per year. And then you can look at insurance and you can figure out what you're gonna get paid for those patients per year. So the allowable cost would be if you want a 10% margin, you can run a quick pro forma and that'll tell you we can afford at a 10% margin with this throughput to build a building that costs this much without. The next step is the functional program you said, which is, okay, to see that many patients in a 16-hour day or a 10-hour day or whatever, I need X number of exam rooms, X number of, which then turns into square footage.
Microphone. Oh, good.
Which can then be developed into an actual program of a building. It could be 1 floor, it could be 20 floors, could be, so you're trying not to be constrained by what we normally do. I was joking, but not. We don't usually have a business plan. We say, we need 100,000 square feet, we'll figure out what we're gonna put in there, and we have X dollars amount of money, and then we'll come, I call it field of dreams, like we'll build it and then we'll figure out the business plan later.
right, thank you, that's exactly what I'm thinking, that it's that kind of clarity of purpose that really guides a lot of, then the inquiry helps us begin to flesh that out.
Right.
Look at all the different roads and directions.
Right.
Thanks.
We're
Yeah.
trying to get our teams to do this work first.
Okay.
It's really hard, because they want to jump right to square footage.
I know.
And it's like, don't even look at buildings yet.
Right.
Figure out what you're trying to accomplish
Yeah.
with the space first.
Yeah.
And then let us do the rest, because that's what we know how to do.
Okay, so I know this is tricky to do in a group, but I'm going to try to walk you through this. I think this is, in big chunks, the basic process of project definition. Okay, and it's fundamental to target value delivery, right? Now, so the first question is, what do I want? And that doesn't mean 100,000 square feet of building, I think. It means, what do I want to accomplish in the world? Right? Right? Why am I doing this project? Then, what's the most I'm willing and able to pay to get it? Right? Because you might be willing but not able. Right? So you're already making big decisions, right? You haven't even thought about cost. You thought about benefits, right? And what you're willing to pay to get those benefits, not the cost of the building. What provides what I want? That's a description. The functional program is the description of that. What's the estimate of probable cost? For that, you need the facilities program, right? Which you can then break apart through regressive thinking from means to ends to means, sorry, got to confuse you, right? And price exactly what, because you have in this, the detail, I could persuade you maybe, try again. The simulation approach that many companies use, I just use Hotela as an example, produce a building information model that you could build. And it would have the capacities that you want. But it may not have the best value. And it may, and you don't know, right? Yeah, may not have the best value. So that's still open. So once we have then the target cost, the expected cost, and the allowable cost, right, at this point. So if you look at the decision diamond, is expected cost greater than allowable, right? If it isn't, then you have headroom, right? So you may choose to add ambition, right, to your project objectives. But if not, then it goes into create and test a project execution plan. And if that plan passes the test, that the responsible parties are willing to take on the residual risk after taking into account what can be mitigated, right? There will be some residual risk. Then there's nothing, the next thing to do is to, if that's accepted, right, then you set your value and cost targets and fund the project. But if it's not, if your allowable cost is below your expected, right, then you've got to rethink what you're doing. And if you're not willing to kill the project, you're probably in the wrong business, right? Because many bad projects are bad from definition. Okay, I just want to, because now I've just talked about setting targets. Now the work starts, right? The hard work starts, and that's steering the project all the way through its life to deliver those targets, to hit them, right? So I'm not going to talk a lot about that. So again, a quote, which I will read, and you can read with me. Because the steering process is rooted in the project vision and function, it also allows for and even encourages a process of value engineering. The project team should always be focused on the how. How can we deliver the function at the best possible cost? How can we optimize space performance and utilization? How can we enhance the business case? The design becomes a response to these how questions. The targets guide the design rather than responding to ungrounded design alternatives. Bring me a rock, right? And I bet you designers have played the bring me a rock game beyond their ability to tolerate doing it again, right? So this is a way to not do that. Do you understand what bring me a rock means? Okay, what do you think of this one, this design? I really don't kind of, okay, well, what do you think of this one? And to simplify it, I say, okay, you want a black rock? No, I don't want a black rock. I want a different kind of rock. You want a blue rock? Oh, no, I don't want a blue rock. So, no. It's disgusting. Not much fun. So what we're arguing, I'm arguing, and others too, is that TBD is a way to free design to be creative. Right? Free design to be creative. And design's not just by the design team, it's the execution of the project, right? So in the design, we want to integrate product and process. What are we going to build? How are we going to build it? Right? One of the starting points for steering is to develop and allocate a cost plan to different cross-functional teams. Right? Cross-functional means owner, designer, builder, inspector, right? Okay? And I could show you examples of those, but I think a lot of you have seen those and know them quite well. And this is an old one. This is from the first successful target value design project or target value delivery project, TVD project. Right? Completed in 2002, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So, but the idea, when I said provisionally allocated, it's provisional because you want to be able to have money move across organizational boundaries, these different, what Bolt calls innovation teams, in order to search for the best solution, right? Now, also, you can use it if one team doesn't make their target, if another teams have underruns, and that's why it's so important to manage contingency on these projects, right? So that you know how much money you have in recovery, so to say. And there's a lot in the book. One of the things that's in it is we talk about and illustrate how these key methods are used to execute the TVD process. Right? And so cross-functional teams in design, set-based design, choosing by advantages for all types of decision-making, not just in design. A3 reports, where, for example, you're always looking at, with CBA, you produce a set of evaluated alternatives, and you understand in terms of what's value for the project, what's its contribution. Alternative 1's contribution, alternative 2, alternative 3, etc. But then you look at the cost, and you don't look at the cost until the point of making the decision. Okay? Because you're really interested in value. But cost is what buys you value. Okay, so and then value engineering, as I mentioned already, I think that, I think this regressive thinking, one form of it is called abduction. And I think abduction is what we speak of when we talk about a creative invention, right? We're creating an alternative that better meets our needs. Right?
So from a
Yep.
contractor standpoint, when you hear the word value engineering, that means cutting costs.
I know.
Yeah.
It's gotten a bad reputation because it's been done inappropriately. It's been often done by a team brought in separate from the design team to critique their work. And of course, the designers really like that. But it's really, I mean, why didn't you do it that way in the first place, right? I mean, that's where you want to do it. You don't need to don't want to have to depend upon someone checking your homework. Right? Check your own homework.
My name is Patricia Tillman, and I wanted to explain there is a reason why I wanted to have like the PhD or the doctor or something there for both Glenn and I, because we are both researchers. So I've worked, it's been 10 years that I'm in the United States, and I've worked for a mechanical contractor, I've worked for 2 general contractors, and I worked for an owner organization. But today I'm wearing the researcher hat, right? So what we really wanted to talk to you guys today and kind of like have your feedback also about this topic. We wanted to talk to you about some examples and best practices in managing value. And we call it value targets. And I'm going to explain a little bit what do we mean by value targets, just in a second. And we also wanted to talk to you and get your opinion about what might be the benefits of making value targets visible throughout project delivery. So I am originally from Brazil. I grew up in Brazil, started my career there as a researcher. I used to work as a consultant, lean consultant for 20 years and at the university. And we were hired by the government in Brazil to evaluate governmental social programs in construction. And that what was led me to do a master's and then a PhD and ended up going out of Brazil, because what we've seen is that sometimes projects not only fail in schedule and costs, but they also fail to generate the benefits that were expected by the owner organization, by the users, and by society. And that was, well, Brazil, it doesn't have a lot of resources, right? So it's kind of like heartbreaking to see that the real benefits are not being generated. So I started a journey to understand what are practices in construction and in design that can improve value generation. And I went to the UK to study what they were doing there, and then I came to the US to study what was happening here. And I fell in love with the US and everything that was going on with IPD and collaboration, and I ended up staying in the Bay Area. So throughout this journey, there were very limited cases that we could see. And then when Glenn was writing his book, he also invited me to the meetings. Thank you for the opportunity. And I could continue that exploration of understanding how to manage value targets. So we found very few practices to make value targets visible. One is in Chile. It was the production of a research project that they did with a small project, commercial project, where they talked to the stakeholders to understand what value was for them. And they tracked and quantified that throughout the delivery process, right? Another case that we found that Glenn started showing you, Hatala. I'm going to show you a quick example for you guys. I'm fascinated with this modeling of requirements and simulations that are possible for us to do nowadays. And I really think this is going to play a very important role in the future of target value delivery. So I have Finland over there, right? And in the UK, so I spent about a couple of years in the UK studying value management practices in hospitals. And it's fascinating. UK has a lot of different tools to do stakeholder management and also try to elicit what value means in that context and then managed throughout the project delivery process. I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of this experience in the UK. This is a snapshot of Hatala's software that Glenn was talking about, and they are called Realizer. So like Glenn was explaining, I find it fascinating. A very simple example. They were trying to build a clinic, a dentist clinic, and they wanted 40 patients per day, to see 40 patients per day. And they also wanted it to be carbon neutral. So Hatala simulated with them these different components, and Hatala actually has a lot of other components that can be put in the software. But before any design is done, you can see the impact on carbon emissions, you can see the impact on your program and your business case, and impact on costs. So very quickly. And there are a lot of softwares like this. If you go to Dirt, right, you go to Dirt to customize the panels, and you see what's happening to costs, right? So Hatala can quickly assess environmental impact, costs, and programmatic business case impact. In the UK, they are very sophisticated with the way they manage the expected outcomes. They have a lot of different tools. They have design quality toolkit. They have, what I was doing there, I helped to develop and implement something called benefits realization method, which is you plan it for the outcomes related to your business case, and then you track, you design the building with those outcomes in mind, and then you track during the project delivery process. So in the UK, they have a lot of research that shows that how the design of the buildings impact the outcomes. So they say like a hospital that's well designed can speed recovery for 27%, or in schools, a good design of a school can improve learning in 10%. So they do a lot of these research to demonstrate how the quality of design will impact the outcomes. So when we talk about value targets, I know a lot of you are thinking about costs, and yes, cost is very important, schedule is also very important, but we are also talking about the values that represent the reason why we are building buildings, right? Their impact on society, their impact on their business case, and the impact on the environment, which is becoming more and more important for us to actually track and measure and demonstrate a low impact to the environment. So some examples, programmatic type targets tied to business case, like James was explaining, right? The different functions of a hospital and how they reflect your operations. Environmental impact, energy consumption, water consumption, the impact of daylight and all those things that you measure, right, and demonstrate that you're having a low impact on the environment. We've seen also examples of projects that have used the design impact, developed targets related to design. Also, targets that represent different stakeholder priorities, and I'll share a little bit more with you about that. Or targets that represent operational outcomes, for instance, in a hospital, right? So that are different examples, and I don't know how many of you actually got to chat about the value target, and how many of you actually thought about these components.
So you have a lot of targets available out there. You have a lot of targets out there, but how do you talk a little bit about how do you prioritize? Which target are you going after? Which takes precedence?
We'll talk a little bit about it, but similar to what Glenn was explaining, I think a lot of the process of managing targets is actually a facilitation process, right? You are engaging stakeholders and understanding who belongs to your value ecosystem and understanding what they need and how to manage the different requirements and requests. So it's more like a facilitation rather than prioritizing one than the other, right?
I kind of hear in your question, we're getting to prioritizing, how do we move quickly towards making some choices or knowing what's important? And I think there's a difference between opening a creative space and then narrowing and making decisions. The prioritizing needs to happen somewhere after you've created a creative space. And we in this industry are geared towards quickly moving towards what's the solution, what's the cost, and how am I going to do it. And we're opening up possibilities, and that's where the facilitation, a big part of where facilitation comes in, is how to get people thinking about the dynamic tension between different types of values. And before we prioritize, we start looking at just understanding all these different things and what would be what is sometimes called an elegant solution that incorporates multiple values. As soon as we start trying to prioritize one over the other, we lose the possibility of exploring how these different values interact and be created.
But I would challenge that, because I'd say you're saying I'm coming at it from an owner's perspective with an open pocketbook. Let's give me everything you have owner-wise. Coming from an owner's side previously, my first thing is like, what's that going to cost me? Because I have a budget in mind. And to say I'm going to turn a design team loose and let them throw 40, 50, 60 different designs at me and spending that amount of money while they're doing that is not what the owner is going. I mean, 90% of the owners are going to.
I
There
think,
might be some out there.
I think what we are trying to do here is putting those variables at the table to be discussed and managed, right? So you have this amount of money, that's not gonna change. And then you have those things to invest on. So I think you should be seeing this literally as an investment management tool, right? You are helping the owner to make the investment that's right for them. They have to put some money on environmental issues, right? They have to put some money on policies that they have to comply. There are multiple pockets that they will have to put their money in. And our job, in my opinion, is to help them with those decisions and to help them to put a little, distribute the money accordingly to what's going to bring back the most for them, right? So even an example, sometimes owners down the line change the programmatic requirements of a facility, and sometimes we go, oh no, again, another change. But if you think of it, first cost for them is perhaps nothing compared to what they can make, the return on investment of shifting a strategy and actually incorporating that additional function on the building, right? So advances in target value delivery. Nowadays we see that a lot. Have you guys seen this? Join? Yeah. So, yeah, so it's fantastic, right? We are becoming very advanced, very good in managing first costs and understanding what are the risks, what are the opportunities, and managing that as we go through design and construction. But there is also something else coming up, right? All these different simulators and modeling of requirements and that helps us understanding the impact without much design, the impact that we're actually going to create in the future. So there is a lot of softwares nowadays that they simulate energy consumption, water consumption, and so on. And this is just starting. So with all these developments, I truly believe that it's providing us the right tools so we can understand the impact and the consequences of our decisions much earlier on. So now I think I can ask the question that we were discussing at dinner, right? Do you know what the value targets for your projects are? So I wanted to share with you guys a little bit of the experience I had in the UK, which for me was fascinating. I participated on this redevelopment program, which was a hospital campus. And it was a very complicated site. It's an historical city close to London. And the hospital was so old that Florence Nightingale, for those who know her, she was like a very, she used to work in the hospital. So so it was a very old hospital that they wanted to rebuild, and a very complicated site because it was a historic city. There was a lot of different stakeholders with eyes to this new development, right?
Did they have that configuration when Florence was working?
No, this is actually the new hospital. This little one here is how it used to look like, and the children's hospital is back there. So it was a lot of intervention on this small town, right? And everybody had the eyes on it. The first thing we did with them was actually to understand the value, what we call the value ecosystem. Who are the stakeholders, right? So typically, when we come to a project, we see a very little, sometimes we see a partial representation of the stakeholders. But who is the owner really? Quite often there is a multitude of different people behind and different forces behind these entities that we deal with on a daily basis, right? So understanding these pressures and how they will play in the value definition is crucial. And we need to understand from the owner's perspective, who are they concerned about? It's not what keeps you up at night, it's who keeps you up at night, right? And this helped us to understand the priorities and helps to understand who do we need to engage and how do we need to treat these people throughout the delivery process. So the process of value definition, it starts way earlier. The system in the UK, they are very strict, right? So this hospital, it's a public funded hospital. So there are funding stakeholders from the government that requires you to pass through a lot of gates. You have to actually plan for the benefits. It put in your business case, you have to turn your business case on, you have to develop a set of different design options, and then you have to prove that you actually achieved what you were planning to on your business case. So we got engaged in that process to help them plan, track, and then evaluate the impact on society, right? So it always started in the business justification and the problem definition, which happened even before the construction team was selected. The way they have in the UK, they have a pool of different suppliers, and then the architect is a team that's managed by the GC. So that problem definition and business justification happens way earlier. And then there is a process of introducing that information to the suppliers, right? To the design and construction partners. And then steering to targets in design, steering to targets in construction, and evaluating during operations. A lot of projects happens here too with post-occupancy evaluation, right? So that's how we would measure those benefits. So typically, before I came here, I actually talked to a lot of different contractors that have target value delivery. And one of the challenges we all agree is that sometimes we were called too late in the process, right? During schematic design, during even further down the design process, and quite often over budget already, right? So then it's very challenging for us to understand we don't have access to what happened during the business case and what is the real motives and purpose of the project, right? So in the UK, they try to bring more and more the suppliers to the earlier stages. And the benefit of that is that you can really, the potential of innovation is much higher. So you are engaged in the problem description and understanding the problem rather than being engaged on the solution process already, right? It was fascinating for me as a researcher to be on these workshops and understanding what the hospital was all about. Throughout a series of workshops that we facilitated with these different stakeholders that were like federal healthcare, regional healthcare, local healthcare, and many other different stakeholders, they came up with a list of what would success mean to us in terms of operations and in terms of business purpose, right? So based on that list, this process of talking to them about the real needs and the problems that they were having created a very deep insights into what their priorities were and what they're willing and able to pay. Then we go back to the cost, right? But you only talk about the cost after you have this deep understanding of what is it that they are trying to achieve. Making value targets explicit can set the basis for decision making and for investment management. Understanding what is driving the owner to invest the money, what is the expected return on investment, can help us to help them make decisions and can help the project team to manage that investment that's being made. And then I had the other question, right, is knowing how the project intends to impact society, the owner business case, or your company's business. Would that change anything for you? Yeah, so in this case, in the UK, what we did is, it was a collaborative effort to, based on that list and the outcomes of that workshop, the designers, and part of it also was because the funding agency required the process to be like that. But it was true set-based design because they had to develop 8 different options, 8 different design options that fulfilled those expected benefits. From those 8, they went down to 5, then they went down to 3, and then 1 was chosen. So it's a long, long process of designing and in conjunction with some key stakeholders and decision makers to narrow down those options. What I think was very interesting too, and I didn't bring pictures of it, is they developed also different options for delivery strategies, right? So each choice, each delivery choice had an impact on costs and schedule. So they planned the construction of the hospital in phases because that would impact the business case of the owner, right? And how the hospital generates revenue. So it was not only the work of architects designing different options of buildings, it was also the participation of the contractors and the builders to understand the different options to fulfill, to deliver the project, right? And then I wish I knew about CBA back then, but I didn't know. So we did, we did a similar system where we, based on the options, we would engage the stakeholders, and there were like 30 people, 35 people in the room, and we would present the options, and those would get discussed among the stakeholders, and they would choose the preferred option, right? Yeah.
Going back to your set-based design, you had 8 down to 5. I assume that you also did 8 parallel estimates and 8 parallel schedules for those different options, and then down to 5. Does that help?
Yeah, so when I was there, the time that I was there, I saw 3 different delivery strategies with schedule and costs and different deployment to site logistics and everything. I've seen 3. I stayed there not for the whole process.
But when they did the 8, you assumed prior to your getting there, you assumed there were parallel estimating, parallel schedules being created.
I assumed there was, so yeah, because when I got there, they were down to 3, and then I saw the 3 schedules and cost estimates and site logistics also being presented.
And they're doing the same thing with the value, 8 different value, 8 different options ranked by the same value factors.
The same value factors, yeah, the same value factors. And then the people would sit in a conference room like this, and then the presentation would show the different options, and they would vote, right? Oh, based on these values that we've agreed, it's the most important for us. Those are the design options that we think it fulfills the best. Then this process was very hard. We also had to how to measure, right? How to measure that we're going in the right direction. This was the hardest part for us. And the way we figured out how to do that was creating a questionnaire and engaging people. So it's subjective answers, right? Throughout the delivery project, you ask stakeholders, oh, how do you think those metrics are being achieved? Which was the way that we found how to measure value. It was based on the opinion of the stakeholders. So then I came to the US. Some of you are gonna recognize this chart.
I feel like most numerical statistics like this can be, especially in a rigid process, can end up being super manipulated by stakeholders that want it to be a certain way.
Yes.
And I mean, I always feel like the number is almost like, in my experience, it's always been theater, where that's kind of a representative number of the soft skills and the soft politics that you've done to like manage all these people to get people to work together. And once the number is there, that's like the last 10% of the work. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, like, how do you manage the soft skills of this to actually get everybody to come to the table in a way where they're like actually focused on collaborating together and come to numbers and follow processes in a really fair way?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was very concerned about the numbers, I have to confess. And then I realized something that I was not expecting. the process of bringing people together to do this exercise is the most valuable thing, right? Because then they talk about it, and so I was going to show you in this slide. I came to the US, some people are going to recognize this chart. I worked for a general contractor. I used to do this in several different projects, and Michael Poland was the project manager of one of those, right? And we used to come and ask about, and this was like way down the road. It wasn't about the values of the building only, but it was about the values of the team. And we used to ask, what is value for you for this project to be successful? And in the beginning, I was very nervous about the numbers, right? But then I realized that something really magical was happening. It gave the opportunity for people to sit down once a month and actually discuss things that were either not going well or recognize things that we were doing very good, very well, right? It gave us the opportunity to actually get to know each other better. And I realized this because there was a friend of mine visiting from Germany, and she collected data from this project that we were engaged on. I didn't know back then. And then she reached out to me. Oh, look, I interviewed the owner, and that's what I found out about the work that you guys were doing. Yeah.
Sorry, well, Percy is somebody from England that actually worked on some early PFI projects. Thanks for advocating for the British construction.
Awesome.
So, question, where was the hospital?
It was in Brighton.
Oh, it was? Okay, I was trying to figure out where. I'm from Bristol. So, I guess, I still keep in touch with the UK news. And I guess what I'm getting feedback from my people I work with is a lot of the PFI projects are coming to full term at the end of 25 years. And there were some good things, some lessons learned. Have you looked back at the outcome at the end of the 25-year term when they're handing it back to the healthcare, national health? The value that they wanted, if you're looking at the outcome at the end of the term,
Yeah, so, hospitals, this hospital here was like more than 20 years, right? So now is the time that actually they are finalizing. Now is the time to go back and do the post-occupancy evaluation, right? So I personally didn't, you actually are giving me good ideas. I might go back there and
So
yeah.
it's a sort of learning question. I have a good friend, there's a lot of litigation related to it. In that at the end of the 25-year term, you have to hand back the hospital in working condition. And the issue is the hospital are going in with a third party and saying, okay, this MRI's HVAC system, you have to maintain it. But you're going to give back to us because they designed to the value, which was perform that function for 25 years. It's not working. This is a non-operable system.
But PFI has a different structure, right? This was P21. So PFI were responsible for the operation of the facility too. It's similar to our P3 here. I think it's P3 that we have here. This is a little bit different. But I know what you mean. Yeah, when you have to maintain also and to keep the functionality throughout the contract. Yeah, I haven't studied that model specifically. I've studied P21, which is a little bit different. You're not responsible for the maintenance and the operations.
Trick is to retire before the end date.
That's a key calculation.
Yeah. There's some big projects in California with the P3 model that I'm really curious because they have like 50-year, 30-year terms or 50-year terms, and everybody's pitching how great it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, yeah, because you're 3 years in. Like you gotta go a full cycle to see if it really works.
I'd encourage you because I went back and met up with Frank. He's a partner at a major P firm. Just hearing him, the lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do and apply that going forward. Some of the things I was involved in Air Myers, the first PFI hospital. I certainly think it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Same as with the P3, everybody loves it, right? But I don't know now what the outcomes are. Yeah, research.
It's like building nuclear plants. Yeah, it works great, but then when you have to do the end of the life cycle and take care of all that waste, like we had no experience, like years and years.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So then this case study, I thought it was great that some of the data that she got from that project, right? It was like improved communication, strengthened trust, aligned expectations, and improved team focus, and the possibility to communicate dissatisfaction, talk about frustration, and address them, which was my favorite point. So yes, the numbers matter, but if you get people to sit and to talk and to iron out issues, and they are happier when they leave the table, that's priceless. And here I brought an example from HKS. So I was working at Bolt, and HKS had a partnership with Bolt. They did the Akron Children's Hospital for Aurora Advocate, and I fell in love with that, with what they did in that project, because they managed to quantify the impact that they had with the construction of the hospital. So then I loved, because the numbers, they really quantified, it was not subjective, right? So they are showing here, like, literally the impact, the agencies of the operations in the hospital, the patient safety, how they impacted with their design strategies, right? The flows, the operation flows of the hospital for the nurses, for the doctors, the impact on carbon footprint, how much they were able to save, and then the costs. Also, number of beds and so on and so on. So everything is like quantifiable and demonstrated the impact that they had. So the goal really is to show the consequences of one's decision, rather if you're using hard data, good numbers, or subjective numbers, you are showing the consequences of decisions. And you are enabling conversations that maximizes what they call in the UK value for money. Did I say that in the microphone? Value for money, right? So you have to manage those different pockets together. It's not only the money and it's not only the value, it's all the different together in front of you in the table, right? So to finalize, why do we think it could be important, right, to make the value targets explicit? Because then the whole team, especially for the whole team, because the whole team gets engaged, right? It gets engaged and they have a better chance, Glenn was telling me, they have a better chance to actually delivering to those targets if they know what they are, right? If you make them explicit. So it creates a shared focus, shared understanding. It increases the sense of purpose and awareness of the impact that we're making on society. There is a psychological effect to that. It helps navigating decisions with awareness of impact to the key outcomes that we're expecting. It helps us manage the investment with the intent to maximize value. It increases the ability to manage the political and social aspects of project delivery. So now we have a few minutes to questions and comments, and we also have an invitation. Like I said, I'm wearing my researcher hat. This has been a lifelong problem to solve, and I'm not done. So we are forming a group to talk about how to make values explicit. And then if you have interest to join, please. Again, this was an opportunity for us to share our thoughts and get some feedback from you guys, if this is a relevant topic for research. Thank you.